Denman here from the Denman Homestead, and I am back with another 100-year-old recipe. For those of you guys who haven't been around or are new to the channel, last year I started baking really old recipes. I wanted to revive the old ways. Laura and I, my daughter, went to a bookstore and we found these old cookbooks that have recipes that are over 100 years old in them. And I wanted to start recreating these recipes, cooking with these same ingredients that they called for 100 years ago. What I found was these recipes had very few ingredients, really good ingredients, and they are very simple to make. However, some of them are pretty funny to try to recreate only because they use terminology we don't use today, like teacups and scant, and just this recipe today that I'm going to be making just calls for a hot oven. It doesn't tell you what temperature to preheat your oven to. You just are supposed to bake it in a hot oven for 20 minutes. So let me tell you a little bit about today's recipe and where it's coming from. I am going to be getting this recipe from the Way to a Man's Heart, the Settlement Cookbook. Let me show you. It is in a rough condition, but it's legible. And today we are going to be making a blackberry roll. It's right here. I'm going to put the full recipe and the ingredients in the video description if you want that information. The reason why we're going to be making this today is because our blackberry bushes are going a little crazy right now. So it's berry season here on the homestead, and I wanted to take advantage of that. And eating fresh berries is great, making smoothies with them is great, but I love a berry cobbler. And I initially thought, I'm gonna make a blackberry cobbler. That's just kind of my go-to when I have extra blackberries. But when I've opened up this book, although there were cobbler recipes, one of the blackberry recipes that was in this book was called a blackberry roll. And I've not heard of that before. So I thought, I'm gonna venture off and do something a little bit different today and not do a cobbler, but do this blackberry roll recipe that's over 100 years old. So part of this recipe actually calls for a separate recipe first, and it says follow directions for the biscuit dough for shortcake on page 67. So we're gonna have to make this shortcake dough first before we can move on with the blackberry filling. So I think essentially what it is it's a roll, but in the roll is blackberries and sugar. So let's make the dough for the roll first. But while I have that dough, while we're gonna make the dough, I am gonna show you my blackberries that we have picked. Here they are, they're floating. This is store-bought this is anything store-bought or from the farm. I rinse off my all the vegetables or fruits, especially berries and things, because tiny little bugs can get into anything. So what I do is I put like a tablespoon of white vinegar with some water and I let them soak, and then all of the impurities or little twigs or little tiny, if there's any sort of little tiny bug that you can't see, they will purge themselves of the fruit, and then we can rinse these off and they'll be good to bake with, so you don't have any surprise protein in your food that you're baking. So I'm going to set this aside for now while they are soaking and cleaning off. I think I measured about 14 ounces of blackberries. I weighed them out and it was about almost 15 ounces. I am preheating my oven. Even though it doesn't tell me what to preheat my oven to, I'm preheating this to 350 degrees. 350 degrees is a really good standard hot oven for cakes and other cookies and desserts. So that's what we're gonna go with, and I'm just gonna keep an eye on it as we're baking this dish. So let's get started. on the biscuit dough for shortcake. All right, first things first, 2 cups of flour. I'm just gonna use 2 cups all-purpose flour. It does not say to sift it, so we're just going straight in here. 1, 2. Then we're gonna need 4 teaspoons baking powder. Four teaspoons baking powder, half a teaspoon salt. I've just been using this fine grain sea salt. You can use whatever salt you've got. Then we need 2 tablespoons of sugar. Okay, so then it says to combine all the dry ingredients, so I'm just gonna give this a quick stir. Okay, so this next step is a little confusing because the instructions say to work in the butter quickly and then add in the milk and roll out on a floured surface. However, the ingredients do not list butter. The ingredients list shortening. So I'm going to assume that you can either use butter or shortening for this recipe. It's calling for a half a cup of shortening. I do have butter here, but I also have shortening, so let's see how much shortening I have. I might have half a cup. So I've got Crisco all vegetable shortening. So I may have just enough for this recipe. Yep, I do. I've got just enough. So I'm gonna add in this half a cup shortening to my flour mixture. Okay, it says to work in your butter or shortening with a fork or blender. I have this pastry cutter here, looks like this. I'm gonna use this, and I'm just gonna work it in kind of like I would with a biscuit dough or pie crust or something. And I'm just gonna use a little bit of experience with this and know that to work something in like this typically means it's gonna need to look like little pea size, like where you can see the shortening or butter incorporated well within the flour to where it's kind of like sandy or pea-sized pieces of the shortening mixed in with the flour. We don't want very large chunks left in this dough. We just want it well incorporated within the flour. And we're doing something called cutting in. And I will show you here in a second what it's going to look like once we're all combined. Alright, I'm pretty happy with the way this looks. Let me show it to you. So can you see that? It looks a little crumbly, but it's well incorporated. All the particles are mixed together well. Okay, and the next step, it says to quickly combine the milk. So we need 3/4 cups of milk. Let's measure that out. I'm using whole milk, so I'm assuming back in the day they probably used whole milk often, probably raw milk. And I'm just going to stir this to combine. I'm not going to overly work this. I don't want the dough to end up being too stiff or dense. Overworked dough can be kind of tough. So I want this to be as flaky and tender as possible. So I'm going to just barely mix that together where it's combined, and I'm going to set this aside for now. Because that is it for the dough part of this recipe. Now we're going to work on the berries. So Let me just read to you what the rest of this dough recipe says. It says, toss on a floured board, pat, roll, and cut with large biscuit cutter. Or roll to fit 2 pans and bake in the oven at 450 degrees Fahrenheit, 12 to 15 minutes. Split the biscuits and fill with crushed sweetened berries. So this dough actually says the temperature of 450 degrees. So I don't know that my roll, my blackberry roll is going to call for the same. Let's just see here. So for the blackberry roll, it says we're gonna need 1.5 quarts blackberries, 1 cup sugar, biscuit dough, and 2 tablespoons of butter. Follow the directions on the biscuit dough for shortcake, page 67. Toss dough on a board, roll 1/2 inch thick, spread with melted butter, and strew on 1/2 of the berries on top, cover with 1/2 of the sugar and cinnamon if desired. Fold dough over on one end and roll. Put in a large, well-greased pan. Surround with the rest of the berries and sugar. Place in a hot oven. Bake 20 minutes or until crisp and well done. Cut into slices and serve warm with sauce in the pan. Blueberries or cherries may also be used. So, I may need to do this at 450 degrees. It doesn't really it doesn't say. So let me go ahead and increase the temperature to 450 and we'll follow the baking directions for the dough for the baking for the blackberry roll. We'll see how it turns out. Okay, so this recipe calls for a well-greased pan. Doesn't tell us what kind of pan, what size pan. So I'm gonna use one of my bread loaf pans, and I've just put a bunch of butter in the bottom of this pan and I spread it around with a napkin so it's well greased. All right, hopefully this works out. Now I'm gonna take my blackberries. It calls for 1.5 quarts. I'm not entirely sure how many quarts this is. Oops. Give this a quick rinse. Oh yeah, just looking at the bottom of this Tupperware container. Glad I rinsed these out. All right. Let me spread these out on a paper towel really quick. Okay, so this says to roll out the dough on a lightly floured surface. So I'm going to put a little bit of flour down, but I'm also putting down some parchment paper because it may make it easier to roll this out onto itself as a roll. I'm not sure. So I'm just gonna put a little bit of flour, spread this out. Get my dough there. Press it. Get my rolling pin and put a little bit of flour along here. It says roll 1/2 inch thick. Okay. I think that's pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty good. All right, so now, all right, so it says to cover with the butter first. So this is 2 tablespoons melted butter. So I'm just going to kind of evenly try to get this butter everywhere. Use my hands. Then it says to top with 1/2 of the berries. Got my berries here that have been drying out on this piece of paper towel. I'm just gonna make a line. I don't know if you guys can see it. Let me angle this down a little bit. These are pretty giant. Like, this is one berry in the palm of my hand. So these berries are large and in charge. And I'm just gonna try to fit as much as I think will fit in this dough here. Okay, and then it says to top with half of the sugar, which it calls for 1 cup sugar. So let's get ½ cup. It also says cinnamon if desired. I'm gonna leave that part out for now. Man, ½ cup seems like a lot of sugar to top this, but okay. I'm just gonna maybe spread this around the dough a little bit, because that is a lot of sugar. We're gonna follow it. Okay. Yikes. Maybe we could shove a couple more berries in here then. All right. Now, ½ cup of sugar, cinnamon if desired, fold dough over one end of the roll. And then roll. And then roll. Okay. Well, this is as far as we're getting with that. And we're gonna roll this. Let's use this parchment paper for help. And we can keep all the berries inside this roll. I'm just going to tuck these corners in a little bit, try to help me out. Okay, put in a large greased pan, surround with the rest of the berries and sugar. Large greased pan. I'm gonna try my best to do the seam side down in this pan here to help this to hold together as it bakes. I'm just gonna see if I can't roll this puppy out on here. Okay, surround with the rest of the berries and sugar. So we are just going to top this and all around the rest of the berries and sugar, which is another ½ cup, which is kind of crazy to me, but we're just gonna go with it. Maybe we won't use it all, because diabetes is a thing. Yeah, let's just, maybe, I'm actually gonna, I hate to go off of what this recipe calls for, but I'm gonna just put like a ½ cup of sugar along with the berries on top. If you wanna try the full recipe, go ahead. But I think that's gonna be plenty sweet. This is the roll surrounded by the extra berries in this pan here, and I'm gonna pop this in the oven, 450 degrees for 20 minutes, and keep an eye on it. Okay guys, so I'm not even joking you, this recipe here calls for a full cup of sugar in ½ of the cup inside the roll and ½ a cup on the outside of the roll. That's the only thing I held back on, was using that full. I probably used ¾ cup of sugar. Okay, so we're gonna leave this in there for 20 minutes. I'm gonna keep an eye on it, and I will get back with you. In the meantime, I'm gonna clean up this area, and then we'll cut it open. Okay, our 20-minute timer just went off, so I'm gonna get this out of the oven and show it to you. Hopefully it's done, and we'll slice it open. I'm gonna do a knife test real quick, kind of like you would a cake. Just stick it down and see if it's completely done in the middle. Let's just see. Seems crisp. Yep, the only thing on the knife is sugar. So let's cut it open. Kind of wish I had vanilla ice cream now with this, but I don't know that we need ice cream on top of all the other stuff. Just seems like it would be naturally what you would need with something like this. Let's see what the best way is to get this out. This is gonna be hot. I'll tell you that right now. It's not the most beautiful plating, but this is what it looks like fresh out of the pan there. Let's try it. It is steaming. Wow. You know, I guess it's not technically a cobbler, but it's very cobbler-like. Same. I guess if there was any difference, it would be more that this is a more cakey, like it's more cake than cobbler. I don't really know what the big difference is, but I like it. It's really good. I think the sugar amount that I used was plenty. It's very sweet, especially with the berries too. Gives it a nice sweetness. So yeah, I think this is a win, guys. Really good. And the amount of berries too seems to be perfect as well. So this is what the bottom of it looks like. It's got like a little brown crust to it. It's really nice. It's like a moist cake. It's not overly done. Definitely recommend if you got extra berries, you could do it any sort of fruit filling, honestly. It's a really good one. 100-year-old recipe. Try it out. Let me know if you do try it out. Let me know how yours ends up, and if you use any additional berries or different. You could do a mixed berry. That would be really good too. But I'm gonna sit here and enjoy this, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye.
On the Denman homestead, where the sun sets golden in the west, we live in harmony with nature, doing what we love best. From the garden to the kitchen, and the bees inside their hive. On the Denman homestead, come along and plant, nourish, thrive.